Welcome to the heart of Champagne country in northern France. We are in Reims, a city with Roman roots, medieval prestige, and one of the greatest architectural achievements in Europe. Standing proudly at its center, the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Reims. This Gothic masterpiece is not just a building, it's a witness to 1,000 years of coronations, wars, spiritual awakenings, and architectural brilliance. Today we explore its story. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Where Wendy Travels. This is Wendy, and we are in Reims, France. And long before this present-day cathedral rose above Reims, this was a sacred place. As early as the 5th century, a church stood here. In fact, it was here that Clovis the first king of the Franks, was baptized by Saint Remigius around 496 AD. That moment marks the symbolic birth of Catholic France. Over the centuries, the church was expanded and renovated, but tragedy struck in 1210. A fire destroyed the Carolingian theater. The citizens of Reims and their archbishop decided not to rebuild modestly. Instead, they envisioned a monument that would rival the heavens, a cathedral worthy of kings. Construction began in 1211, just a year after the fire. What followed was one of the most ambitious Gothic construction projects in medieval Europe. Why such grandeur? Well, because Reims was to be more than a city. It was to be the sacred site for crowning the kings of France. From Louis VIII in 1223 to Charles X in 1825, 31 French monarchs were anointed and crowned here. 31. In elaborate ceremonies steeped in ritual, symbolism, and divine right. This wasn't just a cathedral, it was a gateway between God and the crown. The Reims Cathedral is one of the finest examples of high Gothic architecture. It's 149 meters, 488 feet. The height of the nave is 125 feet, or 38 meters. The twin towers, 266 feet, 81 meters tall. Width at the transept is 61 meters. Its three-tier elevation inside, pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses were cutting-edge 13th century technology. They allowed the walls to soar and remain thin enough for expansive stained glass windows. The west facade of the cathedral is iconic. With more than 2,300 statues, the smiling angel, l'Ange au Sourire, is perhaps the most famous of all. She welcomes pilgrims with grace and warmth. No other place have I ever seen a smiling angel. The rose window, 12 meters across, tells stories of the Bible in vibrant color. And then there's the acoustics, designed to lift the sound of sacred chant like incense towards the heavens. My friends, Reims Cathedral faced extensive damage during World War I. On September 19, 1914, German shell fire caused a devastating fire. The roof collapsed. Sculptures were destroyed, and the lead in the roof melted, pouring down on the stone walls. The international response was immediate. France received support from all over the world to rebuild this symbol of unity and peace. Restoration, however, took decades. From 1919 through the 1930s and beyond, stonemasons, glaziers, and artisans worked to bring Notre Dame de Reims back to life. And today, maintenance is ongoing. Just like the great cathedrals of the world, Reims requires constant care. Conservationists monitor stone erosion, repair delicate stained glass, and clean centuries of soot and pollution. Step inside the church, my friends, and you're enveloped in light, shadow, and silence. The nave, a vast expanse framed by clustered columns, leads the eye toward the high altar. In the choir, where kings once knelt, intricate choir stalls of the 18th century still stand. One of the greatest treasures inside is the stained glass, including windows by Marc Chagall, installed in the 1970s. These modern works harmonize with their medieval neighbors in a spiritual dance of color. The cathedral also houses the pallium of Saint Remy, a relic used during coronations, and statues of the kings of Judah lining the gallery above. The organ, built in the 1930s and restored in the 21st century, remains a living instrument used in weekly masses, sacred concerts, and high holidays. Though it no longer hosts royal coronations, Reims Cathedral is far from a museum. It is an active Roman Catholic church. Masses are held regularly. Holy Week and Christmas draw thousands of visitors. Pilgrims and tourists come for prayer, reflection, and admiration. A small community of local Catholics, worship here weekly, and choirs from around the world come to perform beneath its vaults. It is also the seat of the Archbishop of Reims, a role dating back to Roman times. The cathedral has seen religion evolve through centuries. In medieval France, Catholicism was not just a faith, it was the fabric of daily life. But over time, the Reformation, Enlightenment, French Revolution, and modern secularism transformed the role of the region. During the French Revolution, the cathedral was looted, statues were destroyed, and it was briefly repurposed. In the 19th century, there was a religious revival and restoration of many Catholic institutions. By the 20th century, France became increasingly secular, enshrining the separation of church and state in 1905. Today, my friends, France is largely secular, but the cultural legacy of Catholicism remains. Cathedrals like Reims are cherished for their artistic, historical, and spiritual value, even by those who don't attend Mass. Reims Cathedral is not only a religious site, it's a monument to peace. In 1962, French President Charles de Gaulle and German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer met here to celebrate reconciliation after 2 world wars. The handshake beneath the stained glass remains one of the most powerful moments in post-war Europe, right here in this Gothic Reims Cathedral. The cathedral, once damaged by German bombs, became the symbol of Franco-German friendship and European unity. And today, the Germans have sent gifts to the church: stained glass windows and statues. In 1991, Reims Cathedral, together with the former Archbishop's Palace, the Palace du Tau, and the Abbey of Saint Remy, was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Why? Well, because it represents the spiritual, artistic, and political essence of France. And because it's one of the finest examples of Gothic architecture, influencing countless buildings throughout Europe. And again, as we stated earlier, this church crowned So many kings. From Louis VIII in 1223 to Charles X in 1825, 31 French monarchs were crowned here. The facade of Reims Cathedral is like a sculpted Bible. It features over 2,300 individual statues, a staggering number that turns the church's exterior into a monumental visual sermon. One of the most iconic figures, as we already mentioned, is the smiling angel. She's on the north portal of the church, and she was damaged in World War II. It became a symbol of resilience when it was painstakingly restored. Above the central portal is a row of statues representing the King of the Old Testament, anchoring Christ's divine ancestry. This lineage reinforced the divine right of French monarchs who were crowned inside. Christ, the judge, angels with trumpets, and the weighing of souls, common Gothic themes. The statues outside on the walls of the church are more than just decoration. They are and were meant to be a teaching tool for an illiterate population. They showed people how to live, what to believe, and where they were in the spiritual cosmos. Reims Cathedral is the only Gothic cathedral in France where you'll find these sculpted figures on the walls inside the western entrance. This is significant. Like Chartres and Amiens limit their sculptural programs to the exterior facades, or place figures high above the niches or around the choir screen. But in Reims, it breaks the mold. As you enter through the western doors and step into the entrance area before the nave, you're greeted not just by grandeur, but by rows of statues flanking you on both sides, almost like sentinels of faith. These include saints, bishops, and patriarchs of the early church, figures tied to local religious history like Saints Remy and the bishop who baptized Clovis. Some believe there are allegorical figures representing theological virtues or apostles. The way they're placed, almost at eye level, is meant to bridge the divine and the human. They aren't remote figures in the clouds. They're on your level, inviting you into their sacred space. Together, the exterior and the interior statuary from a liturgical and political narrative, the outside prepares the soul, showing you the Last Judgment, the kings, the angels, the biblical stories. Inside the Gothic church, especially at the entrance, it welcomes the soul into divine truth. With earthly guides like saints and bishops, this unique sculptural setup, paired with Reims's role as the coronation church, amplified its message of divine right, spirituality, spiritual authority, and sacred transformation. My friends, Reims Cathedral is not just stone and stained glass. It's living history. It has survived fire and war, kings and revolutions. It's crowned rulers and welcomed the humble. It stood for peace in a time of war and unity in a time of division. As long as there are people to walk its nave, hear its bells, and gaze in wonder at the divine heights of Gothic ambition, Notre Dame de Reims will live on. Thank you, my friends, for joining me on this adventure, this journey through time, faith, and architecture. Please hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you again real soon. Have a great day.